All right, back to story time. I printed this out because these are our sponsors, because nobody watches my videos except for these people. All right, where should we go now? So this is what I talked about in the last video, then I wrote a bunch of things. We'll just go right here. This one's not really a story. It's just how more of a goal. It's a very vague goal that the people in my restaurant are told to shoot for, which is to get 1% better every day. Now, I like I said, it's vague. 1% is a very immeasurable thing because you can't say you did 100 points of stuff yesterday, you did 1 point better today. So it's just a vague thing. But basically, it's do a little bit better than you did the day before. And even if it's not, it's going to be like the stock market. It's going to go up and down. But as long as you're trending upwards, that's the goal. So that's the 1% goal. We'll talk about food philosophy now. So when the restaurant first opened, it opened in 2 weeks. So we didn't have a lot of time to R&D and trial everything. And there was only me and one other person in the kitchen initially. So not that much labor to go around. So it's very get it done. You just have to open the restaurant so we can pay some bills. So that like I said in the other one, it was very rushed and just get it done. And just like the 1% philosophy that got applied to food, the way we handled menu changes is we had, like, let's say 16 dishes on the menu. Whenever we changed the menu, which was about every 2 to 3 months when we first started, we had a menu of like 16 dishes, and then we always deleted the weaker half, basically, because if you have this many dishes, you cut out the bottom 50%, and then you create 50% more, so it's 8 more dishes, and then you mix it in. What are the chances that your 8 new dishes are still the 8 crappy dishes? Probably pretty low. So it's more of a mixed bag. But these existing ones do have an advantage because they've been proven to knock out dishes over time. So over time, let's say there was these 8 dishes. You substituted the bottom half for 8 more. It's a mixed bag. There's 16 new dishes, or 16 dishes total. Then on the next menu change, you knock out the bottom. So basically, it's like brackets in a tournament. And by this point, we've done at least 20 menu changes already. Total number of new dishes that we've made, probably at least over 100. So you can think of our existing menu now went through a filter of putting in, let's say, well, we changed it 15 times so far, but then over time we changed it less, because in the beginning we ripped out half of it, but when the dishes kept getting stronger, we ripped out less of the dishes because we just ripped out the ones that we thought were not good enough for us. And then after a certain point, every dish was a banger. They're all good dishes. So then we started replacing less of them, because you don't want to replace a good dish and then throw a random one in the bag and then it's not that good anyways. We only replaced it if we thought it was better than the old dish. So 15 menus, we probably changed 120 dishes. So you can think of it as you put 120 dishes into this filter, and then our current menu is the surviving 15 dishes. So that's kind of the same philosophy. Is if you knock out the weak parts, you replace it with a question mark, more likely than not, it's going to be better than your weakest dish. So just get a little bit better every menu change. As far as creativity, I think creativity brings value. It's the same reason why, let's say, Thai food or Chinese, Japanese, ethnic foods are always going to be the same because that's their selling point. You can eat a Chinese dish at this restaurant or a Chinese one at this one. They're going to be different, but they're not. They're going to have the same flavor and idea. So tradition is the opposite of creativity. And where my restaurants, we don't do we we take the base from tradition and then we do something to it to make it modern and new and interesting, because like you can't say the most creative dish is the best or the least creative dish is the best because it's traditional. It's it's always it's like a gray area of like, is there a dish on the hyper creative side that is very good? Yes. And then is there one traditional that's very good? Yes. Is there one in the middle that's very good? Yes. It's just for my restaurants, we look for somewhere, probably I would say in the 75 percentile range of tradition to creativity, because I think if you go too far into creativity, that people can't relate to it anymore. Like if you just said, here's asparagus with apricot jam or something, just completely weird. No, people don't have, even though if you ate it, you could be like, okay, this is technically cooked well and the flavor combinations work. Do you actually crave asparagus with apricots? No. Do you crave McDonald's? Yes. Now, where we would land, I would say, is if we took, let's, for example, McDonald's, if we took all the ingredients of a Big Mac, but we turned it into a modern steak dish. So instead of the burger patty, you have a dry aged steak. Instead of the bun, you have, I don't know, some pastry with sesame seeds on it. Instead of the you get the point. You take something familiar, you create it into this new dish, and it should be close enough that if you fed it to somebody, that's a very big thing, I think. You need to feed food to people who are trying it without telling them and describing to them what the dish is. Because if you're telling them what they should be tasting, you're just turning it into an echo chamber. You're telling them, this is garlic, this is ginger, this is green onion. Then they're going to taste it and be like, oh, yeah, it's garlic, green onion, and ginger. But if they ate it without you telling them, then would they be able to pick out that that is the flavor profile? So it's kind of like a truth in labeling. If you say something should taste like something, they should be able to taste it without you having to tell them about it. Because like if you dry age a steak for 90 days versus one that you didn't and you gave it to somebody, they would be able to tell that it was dry age if they know what they're talking about. And if the difference was indiscernible, why are you doing it? Like if you say you did this thing to this thing and you did all this work and it tastes the same, what's the point other than so you can say you did it, so they can be like, oh, they spent so much time on it, but it tastes like a normal piece of chicken or something like that. So that's creativity. Who creates in our restaurants? Everyone does. In the beginning, that was the only time that I made every dish. Beyond that, I always tried to make sure, because learning to cook is one thing. It's learning to sear a steak, learning to cut vegetables, learning to do that. That's cooking. Learning to create is a chef's job. And I think it's better if you start people when they're younger or earlier in their careers, because it's not something you can learn in one day. So it's better if you start them earlier, and then while they're learning cooking, you step up side by side, and then they can be a functional chef by, let's say, 4 to 5 years, instead of learning to cook for 5 years, then learning to create for 5 years, and it ends up taking 10 years. Now, that would be preferable for people who want to force their employees to stick around and work for them, because if you teach your employees everything and they can basically do your same work, then they'll just leave, because what's the point of them staying there? They're not going to learn, and they're not doing the job that they learned how to do, which is be the chef. Then they'll leave, which in my restaurants, we circumvent that problem by opening more restaurants. So we are a cycle that we feed into ourselves, whereas most other restaurants, it's A to B and there's no circle. That's why they want people to have their knowledge, gatekeeping knowledge. I wrote that down there. Let me see how much time. Oh, 10 minutes already. Oh, we'll just finish that. Who creates in my restaurants? All the cooks, all the chefs. If they're willing to put a dish up and it's a good enough idea, well, everyone will put their input in, and we'll try to make it look like a cohesive menu where you can't really tell if it was a low level or a high level chef or cook who created the dish. It just looks cohesive as a menu. So everyone has the ability to do it, but we have to make sure it's up to our standards. And this one's pretty short, but the value in creativity. Some restaurants, they sell expensive ingredients. They don't do anything and they just make it look really nice. They toast brioche and they put caviar on top and they say this is my signature dish or something like that. Or, they see our piece of Wagyu and they put potato puree next to it, and then all of a sudden it's fancy. Or you do a fancy spoon movement and then it's fancy. That doesn't take any skill. I mean, it takes skill, but come on. You moved your hand in a certain way. You toasted bread and you put caviar on it. Obviously, it's going to taste good. So, yeah, I find some chefs, they combine expensive things and put it on the plate, and that's how the value is created in the dish, by putting expensive things on the plate. But I think a chef's job is to create value with starting with something that has less value in the beginning. If you can turn a $50 dollop of caviar into $60 by scooping it, what's the point? You made $10. Whereas if you could turn a beet into a dish and sell it for $20 and the beet is $1, you made $19. But it's not just the flat dollar amount, it's the percentage in value relative to both of them too, because caviar is 50, 60. That's like a 10-20% increase in value, whereas taking a $1 beet and turning it into a $20 dish, that's a 2,000% value increase, and it's slightly less than double of the flat dollar value. So I always tell my staff to try and create value through creativity, because when you make more money, because 50 dollops of caviar is 50 times 50, but taking the time to create one dish, let's say a beet, $1 times 50 is 50. 50 times 50 is 2,500. Like, your return on your initial investment, which is the creativity, the longer it goes, the more exponential your value gains are, which also applies to, so that's why I always tell them, if you guys make more money for the restaurant, you guys are going to get paid more. This isn't another restaurant where you're going to get paid as little as I'm willing to pay you, or somebody else somewhere is willing to pay you to steal you from me. Your pay is not dependent on the market, basically. Your pay is dependent on how much value you create for the restaurant, which in turn gives it back to you. So that's basically that. We'll cut it off there. Like and subscribe.